Hello, hello, and welcome or welcome back, as it were, to the Curious Coaches Lemonade Stand with your host, Dr. Gena. If you've never been here before, thank you so much for dropping by. Welcome to your friendly neighborhood virtual third place where you can stop by, grab something sweet, refreshing, and zesty to quench your thirst, something you might want to share with others because it's made you stop and go, If you have been here before, thank you so much for coming back. Really appreciate you coming to spend your time with us and to get something that is going to be zesty and fill your cup just the way you need it to be filled. With us today, we have a very awesome and unique guest. This is my friend Patrick from all the way down in, is it Rhode Island, New York?
Road, no, oh my, I'm offended. I don't know if we can continue anymore. We might have to adjourn here.
I know, right?
I am from Rhode Island, which is the smallest state in the U.S., but we are still a state for real. My dad's from New York, so I guess I'll let that one slide. But yeah, I'm from Rhode
I
Island.
love to bother Rhode Island people with that.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times they forget about us. They think we're like part of Connecticut or something. But no, I am from Rhode Island. It is its own state for real.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Patrick, and what brings us together here today. And it was one quick mention of comics. So, if you'd like to sort of illuminate what it is about comics that brought us together that resonates for you, feel free to throw that into your intro.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Patrick, and I am a husband to Kelly, a dad to Parker and Annabelle, and in my spare time, I am an IT manager. And
Love
so,
that.
yeah, so and that is where I met Gena. Gena is an executive coach and an awesome one at that, by the way, if you're looking. So. Yeah, and we got to talking through a number of conversations this past fall and winter, and I had mentioned that I'm a comic book fan, and I've been collecting comic books since I was 10. Specifically, the Amazing Spider-Man is my primary collection, but I'm a fan of all comics, all genres, all characters, and really just a fan of the medium, and so that kind of informs my managerial style and how I relate to other people. And I think that is what sparked your curiosity in having this conversation.
I don't remember you mentioning that it informs your managerial style. And man, I would love to be in the interview where you answer a question about your managerial style.
Man.
It's really informed by comics. Tell me more. Tell me more about that.
So on more than one occasion, HR has told me, you cannot ask a candidate what their favorite superhero is and then rule them out based on that. So they have told me I cannot do that, but I do. It's the comic books and superheroes in particular, but not even just superheroes. They're written by human beings, and they are incredibly powerful because they reflect the culture back to us, and they do it in both a literal way with words on the page, but they also do it in a visual way, and so that's super impactful.
Yeah.
And I mentioned I got started when I was 10. I didn't really want to read chapter books. Like, they give me a headache, right, and stuff like that. And it was my mom who watched an episode of Oprah at the time, and in which Oprah had said, it doesn't matter what your child reads, just get them reading anything. And so
you got Oprah to thank for mom
I do
validating comic reading.
Yes, absolutely. And I, just so you know, I am gonna throw shout outs to both my mom and my dad on this because I owe where I am today to the two of them for sure. But yeah, and so that kind of gave the green light for my mind to say, okay, he likes superheroes. He likes the Batman movies were very popular at the time, and it was like, all right, he can read these. This is fine. He's reading. He likes doing it. He's doing it on his own. Let him go. And I'm very grateful for that because what you see behind me, these shelves, I'm very fortunate to my wife that the built-ins behind me don't house DVD players and stuff like that. They house my comic book collection. So
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm very fortunate to all the people in my life that they have all embraced my hobby, and you know, eh, we and I think this goes to why we're talking today, is because what I try to do is relate this hobby, this genre, which is so varied and diverse. It almost
That's
does it a
true.
disservice to say it's one genre, right, or one medium, because it's just everywhere, and it's written by people of all different stripes.
Uh-huh.
So what I try to do is relate my hobby to the people in my life and what matters to them. And so I'll give a for instance. So one of my best friends is a history teacher, and how I relate originally how I related comics to him is that the superheroes that were created in the 1930s and early 1940s, the world was obviously in a very dark place.
Yep.
The heroes that came about then were what we would call aspirational. So Superman, Wonder Woman, Captain America.
Yep.
These are characters that are good all the time. They are good for the sake of being good. They are role models for us.
Interesting.
Yeah, they are characters that we can look up to, that they will do the right thing when it is hard.
Right.
After World War II, superhero comics kind of took a backseat in the later 1940s and 1950s, and that's when you had a lot of monster comics, westerns, romance comics, etc. And then it wasn't until 1961, with Fantastic Four #1 by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, that he created the Fantastic Four and created the Marvel Universe. And what's interesting about that is the heroes that were created in the 1960s, Cold War's going on. There's a lot of uncertainty. People are scared. They don't know what is up. There's all nuclear was an issue, the whole thing. A lot of the characters that were made then were science based. And so Spider-Man was
Oh,
bitten by a radioactive
yeah.
spider, and the
Oh,
Hulk
the
was
Hulk.
blown
Yeah.
blown up by a gamma bomb and turned
Yep.
big and green. Okay. And so the Fantastic Four got their powers through cosmic radiation. And so that is kind of how comics reflect the world around them.
Yeah.
And famously, Stanley said that the Marvel universe is the world outside your window, and that is, I love that so much, and I love that
Yep.
for this conversation, just because they are. They're it's. I almost don't want to mention it, but like everybody's familiar with like Bam, Pow, Whiff, whatever
Yep.
from the Batman '66 TV show, which was great at the time, and I will defend that show till my last breath. Okay, but it's more than that, and it is the stories of our time, of our people, of our cultures, and the heroes that I mentioned, the Marvel heroes specifically from the 1960s, but since then this is not about one line at all. Those heroes were inspirational in that you could be them.
Hmm.
Okay. um Spider-Man is Peter Parker, who was a nerd, who got bullied, who never got the girl until later, but like that he was the everyman. And
The dual identity comes about as opposed to the aspirational, like, well, I guess Superman had Clark Kent.
he did, yes, and Batman as well. But this was most recently exemplified, I think, in the Dark Knight trilogy, in that for Batman, say Bruce Wayne is the mask.
Mhm.
Batman is who he
Interesting.
is.
Yeah.
He,
Yeah.
Batman is the one who, um, when his parents were killed in the alley and stuff like that, that's who he is. And Bruce Wayne, the billionaire playboy, etc., that's the mask. And so it's interesting too, mentioning Batman. Batman of DC is the most inspirational, the most like Marvel, in my opinion. And then you have Captain America on the Marvel side, who's most like the DC, the
Yeah.
aspirational.
I could see that. Yeah.
So, but yeah, and that is how I would relate to my history teacher friend. Is we would talk about like the origins around the time, what was happening in the world, and how that informed the creation of new stories and new characters going around that
Right.
have lasted till today.
What led you to analyzing it from this lens, like to even go in and do the homework and recognize, okay, these are aspirational. It's tied to what's happening in this historical era versus inspirational in the 60s. What even led you to that level of analysis and taking that angle to look at it?
I have been doing this a long time. Like I said, I am in my low 40s. I'm in my young 40s, and so I've been reading since I was 10. So over 30 years of reading comics themselves, but then also reading about comics, interviews, going to Comic Cons, listening to panels.
Mm.
That's my favorite thing. Is when there is a convention around. Of course I love going and finding, like, the diamond in the rough, the issue that fills the gap, if you will.
Ooh, yep.
But one of my favorite things is to listen to the artists and the writers, and especially like the old timers who are like, well, this happened here and that's why this character is blue.
Mm.
The meta information around the comics is super interesting to me as an adult, in addition to the actual stories themselves.
Yeah,
So
that makes a lot of sense. So if you're looking at, I mean, I'm thinking about what you said around the inspirational era. And I think
hmm
when we first started talking about this, in a coaching session way back when,
yep.
I remember when you were talking about the 60s and what was happening then.
hmm
And I related it, from a very particular kind of cultural lens to the fact that, a big thing in my household with my husband, Mark, and talking about with my kids is the civil rights angle on
For
particularly the
sure.
X-Men and looking
Yep.
at Professor Xavier and Magneto and their
Absolutely.
representations of MLK, which MLK Day just passed,
You got
as
it.
well as or vis-a-vis um, um,
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X. Sorry, my
Yes.
mind is completely slipping.
Yeah.
So that
Absolutely.
thinking about that tension between them and how they behaved in the comics is such an entry point I find for teaching my young sons about that civil rights era, what it was about, what
Yeah.
were, internal divisions that were happening, and what kind of approaches were taken, and how were these men different in their mindsets and the way they chose to look at and try and act upon the same issue, which,
Yep.
was racism and very, very blatant discrimination. So that something that you find you do as well? Like, I hear you doing that with your history teacher friend. Is that something you would
hmm
do with, your own kids, for example, using comics as an
Absolutely.
entry point? Yeah?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Um it's super interesting because my son, my oldest, is about to turn 11, and he has pretty much seen all of the Marvel movies, all of the DC, and he's seen, and he's my buddy. All right, like we'll discuss theories and stuff like that. And it was interesting. I asked my wife, it's like all of those movies are PG-13, and we've let him watch them as an 11-year-old, and we've watched them with him, and
Mhm.
coach him on the tougher things. And who would he be as a person if I waited until he was 13 to introduce him to these topics? And so,
Interesting
such a weird
question.
thought experiment, because, like, his name is Parker. All right, he's named after Peter Parker, and that was my wife's idea, by the way. All right,
I love it.
it was her idea, not my. I said yes immediately, but that was her idea. But yeah, and so absolutely, to you asked about the X-Men. Love the X-Men, and they are different. And what did I just say? The heroes that were created in the early 1960s were largely science based. Again, a happy accident, something happened to them. The X-Men did not. The X-Men were mutants.
Yeah.
So nothing happened to them. That was they just grew up, and then it turned out they were mutants. And whether they got claws coming out of their hands, or optic blasts, or they could move stuff with their mind, it was natural. And so there's been plenty of articles written about how the X-Men were meant to be an analog in the civil rights movement,
Mhm.
100%. And their tagline is that they would fight for a world that hates and fears them,
Yeah.
and they would hate and fear them because they're different.
Yes.
And but how are they really different if they were coming in to save the day, then versus Spider-Man or Captain America or normal humans? It's only because they happen to know that they were mutants that the public in this fictional universe grew to dislike them and hated them and wanted them out, much like in the 60s, civil rights
Yeah.
era.
The distrust and fear, of course, being the basis of that. Yeah.
Right. And what's super interesting is there are certain characters who have crossed over, who were X-Men, then they became Avengers. And it's super interesting. After an issue or two, those characters who were hated and feared, and they had pitchforks and they were coming after him because they were different and they were mutants. Once they joined the Avengers, oh well, they're okay. They're okay now, right? And
What's that about?
right, a colorful superhero, different powers coming in to save the day. All right, but yeah, and the Scarlet Witch is one. She's Magneto's daughter, and she was the focus of a major movie, Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness, and the whole thing with that.
One of the scarier ones, I think.
One of the scary, because she's uber powerful,
She
right?
is, she
Yeah,
is.
do not mess with her.
That's a
And so-
hypothetical dinner conversation all the time. Scarlet Witch and my kids will give, some lead. And usually it's Scarlet Witch.
yeah, right.
Who's going to win
and
in the
so
battle?
yeah, she because she was Magneto's daughter, she's an interesting case. She worked with Magneto in the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and she ultimately said, this is not for me. Yeah, again, the Malcolm X, the kind of more aggressive approach to civil rights. She was like, this is not for me, whatever. She was recruited into the Avengers by Captain America, and after a while, she was okay, she's an Avenger, she's cool, and totally forgotten the fact that she used to be part of the bad guys. So it's just interesting. But the X-Men are a great case, for civil rights. We absolutely, my wife and I use them as an example. My son and daughter, love all of these stories. Another one from that age talking about civil rights was the Black Panther, who is major motion picture now, is awesome. And the thing with him, Stan Lee did an interview with him where he was like, okay, I want to introduce more Black characters, but I don't just want any character. And he's like, you know what? I want him to be the king. And so it was like, nope. And so in the most advanced civilization, the most advanced country, Wakanda, all right, nope, this guy's the king. And he came to America, and they went back in outer space and the whole thing. But it was like that was Stan Lee in the 60s. Fantastic Four or either 48 or 52 or around there, probably 48. And yeah, like he wanted to do that. He wanted to introduce different characters from different nations, from different places, and to show how cool they could be. And obviously the Black Panther has taken off and is an awesome character. Shuri is now the current Black Panther in the movies. That is comic accurate. There have been multiple times where Shuri has become the Black Panther, and they've just done a tremendous job with and that's kind of what I mean about like art imitating life. Is the movies, the best movies in my opinion, reflect back on the source material, where play the hits type of thing, where this story, this character, this is what happens to them. What I disliked about movies when I was little, and I kind of preferred the comic books myself, was when they would change people's names for no reason, or they would change the background. So best example is in the Hulk TV show from 1977, which I love. Bruce Banner became David Banner, and it's like, why? Right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't watch that one, but yeah, why?
and it's that one's an interesting case too, because it was Bruce Banner when Stan Lee first wrote the Hulk in Incredible Hulk #1, and after that they were famously, he started calling him Robert Banner. And Stan was the writer and the editor at the time, and so he just wrote it and got approved and whatever. And so now, is it Bruce Banner or is it Robert Banner? And when somebody brought this to Stan Lee's attention, he was like, well, obviously it's just Robert Bruce Banner is his name. He just goes by Bruce.
Obviously.
All right, obviously. So I kind of give the Hulk TV show a pass calling him David Banner, fine, because maybe that was a nod to Bruce Banner and Robert Bruce Banner from the early days of the Hulk. So
I think there's so much power in a name, though. Like, I remember the conversation when you shared with me that Parker is named
yep,
after Peter Parker, and
yep,
I shared with you, I tried to capture both. I have my younger son is Xavier, is his first
mm-hmm,
name, and
yep,
my older son, Malcolm, is his middle name. Not in
awesome,
any way accidental, very intentional.
yep,
I
love
was
it,
like,
love
let's
it
co-opt both approaches. This is what we're
for
gonna have
sure.
in this family.
Yeah, no, that is awesome, and you know, I love telling that story. And whenever we meet somebody new, do you have any kids? Sure, yeah, I have a son, Parker, and daughter Annabelle. And he's like, oh, okay. And if it comes up, where'd you get those names? It's like, oh, we named them after Spider-Man. Pause and leave it right that. Right? And they're like, what you did? And then we get to tell the story. And I was like, hey, it was my wife's idea. Somebody asked my wife, so what superhero are you naming your son? A- as if it was a given, as if it was obvious. And so she's like, that's a great idea. We were struggling for names at the time. We
Oh,
didn't know.
wow.
And so, Captain America was big. So Steve, Iron Man was big at the time from the movies, Tony. And so then it was like, at that point, Spider-Man hadn't joined the rest of the superheroes. He had movies, he had awesome movies, but he was separate. And so we were like, Peter, and we weren't that big a fan of Peter, but then it was like, how about Parker? And it was like, done.
Yeah.
And it had to have it. So, and I would be totally remiss if I didn't mention my daughter here. My daughter is named after my wife's grandmother, and her middle name is Lily. And Lily is my great great grandmother who lived to be 101,
Wow.
and my wife's other grandmother. So my daughter is covered. My daughter's carrying the she's got the family name end of it. So
And I love that that's kind of a reversal in itself, right?
right, right,
We
yeah,
always think of sons carrying on the family name.
yep.
I still remember to this day when I was getting married and I told my dad, "I'm gonna hyphenate." And Dad, I hope you're watching this. You remember this argument we had. He looks at me, he's like, "Well, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just take his last name?" I'm like, "I don't know, Mr. Chang. I thought you'd appreciate I was trying to keep your name alive."
Good for you. That's
And
awesome.
so I think that the power of a name is really important. And I love that the flipping, gender wise or any other way too. When people would approach me and ask, people would actually apologetically say, "Oh, hey, Professor X, sorry, you don't mind me calling your son that?" I'm like, "No, that's why we named him that."
Yeah.
Really? Like people are like,
Oh, that's yeah,
seriously? Like it's okay with you if I call him that? So we have lots of family friends that just that's what
yeah.
they call him, Professor X.
Oh, that's awesome. No, own it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
So all of those comics behind you,
Yes.
do you take some out sporadically to read them? Are they like always just right on that shelf? Don't move them, don't touch them. Do you interact with them? Go back and do you have favorites? How do you continue that comic passion?
Yeah. So the ones that you can see up above are what's called trade paperbacks or hardcovers, and so they are reprints in most cases. They are reprints of the original single issue comic books. So the single issue comic books I have you probably can't see them. They're behind the chair. They're in the lower cases, pull out drawers. A friend of mine's dad does built-ins, and so we were like, we needed a place for them. Didn't want to put them in the basement. My wife said it's just got to look good. It needs to be tasteful. It's got to look like a living room. And so I was like, no problem. So we had custom shelves built for my single issue comic books.
That's love.
Um, yeah, no, I am so lucky. I love my wife to death. She is the best. Um, and so then the ones up here above are ones that it, they're collected editions. So I for my super old ones I use gloves, and try not to, if I untape them from their bag and board and then take them out, I generally will put them in a new bag and board if I put them back in. So to have collected editions on the shelf makes for more easy reading.
Uh-huh.
And then also too, the big trend now for in terms of space saving is getting them digitally on tablets, and so
Yeah.
I have some there as well.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, this one you can kind of see it. They're colored on the bottom and they have white tops. That is a series. And again, this is how I would relate to people. I actually have two copies of each of these. And the series is called Why the Last Man by Brian K. Vaughan and Pia Guerrera. And it is a story about 60 issues contained over 10 volumes. It's about the story that a day in 2002, every male mammal in the world dies, except for this one kid and his pet monkey. And
Wow.
and so, chauvinistically, you might think I'm the last man in the world. This is great. Turns out it's not great, and a lot of problems, societal issues. It's a book with a very feminist point of view. I love this book, and the reason why we have two copies is it was said, again, reading about the comics, interviews and stuff like that, is that Why the Last Man is the comic book you should give to people who have never read a comic book before, or girls. And so so the one of the copies is mine and the other copy is my wife, and my wife is like, you are never ever ever getting rid of the two copies. She goes, that is my copy. That was one of the first things you ever gave me. And so we are gonna have two copies forever. But yeah, it is such a great story, and it's very adult. It deals with societal big picture topics, like, for example, you can't drive anywhere because the plague hit around 8 a.m. And so all the highways are jammed up with cars that have
Oh,
crashed on the highway.
wow.
All right. It was something like all the electricity went out because at the time, I think it was like 90% of electrical engineers were men running electrical plants. Okay.
Okay, I can see how
Planes,
this gets interesting. Yep.
right? Planes crashed because a majority of them pilots were men. And so it was like, whoa, this is crazy. So, and it was a story to kind of flip what you would think. And so, yeah, that's the story of those, is that I gave a copy to my wife. She read the first one and loved it. And she's like, you got to get me other ones. And at the time we were doing the long distance thing in grad school. And so, yeah, whenever I would go visit her, I would bring her the latest one. And so, yeah,
Aw.
she will never let me get rid of the two sets that we have.
I
So I'm
love that, and, quick parallel here, when I was getting together with my husband, Mark, I remember having lots of comic book discussions because he big fan, would just sit and, if he's gonna get in trouble in class, it's probably because he's sketching a scene from a favorite comic book, and one day, early in our dating time, so this is like high school, we go way
hmm
back, we're chatting about our favorite comics. And he's like, "Oh, you're into comics?" Because I think he'd come by and he saw I had a shelf full of Betty and Veronica's. I'm like, "Yes,
Yep.
I love Betty and Veronica, but that's not the only thing I read." He's like, "Oh yeah, I saw your Garfields." I'm like, "Okay, you can get the mockery tone out of it. I
Right.
read a lot
Yeah.
of different kinds of
There's an
comics."
edge there. Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so it got into talking about superhero stuff and realized we both loved X-Men.
hmm
And he's like, "Yeah, but, like, how deep do you go into X-Men?" So it becomes like this, competition, like, "Well,
Oh yeah.
are you a
Right.
true fan?" And I'm
Oh
like,
God,
"Well,
the gatekeeping. Yeah.
right?" I'm like, "Well, my
Yes.
real heart it was always with Alpha Flight, to be like, to be honest." And he's like,
Yep.
"You know what Alpha Flight is?" And
Sure do.
that was the moment where I heard the lock just closing over his heart, like, I'm like, "That's it. He's mine now. I got him." And it was somewhere between Alpha Flight and hip hop. Definitely. And
Okay.
so I didn't want to forget to bring this out because I know I had mentioned it to you in one of our conversations. This is his. So this is by an artist by
Man.
the name of Beto.
Okay.
And you definitely, sir, are gonna be recognizing a bunch of these covers, like where
I
they're from,
do.
right? So
Yeah.
this is renewing them and reimagining them from a hip hop perspective. So
Absolutely.
I am Nas. Who was that?
That was based off a cover of Avengers, and that is the Vision. That
Yes,
the big
I
character
love
is the
Avengers. I couldn't remember
Vision.
which one. Thank you.
Yep.
Right, so you got Tupac and Aaliyah here. You've
Tupac.
got
That.
everyone from MF Doom, Lauryn Hill, Rakim, Public Enemy. You got the whole Wu-Tang Clan over here. It's an
Yeah.
amazing piece of art. This hangs in my foyer.
It's tremendous. And so just to go through it, like, gatekeeping, I'll prove my creds. That top middle was an homage to the famous X-Men storyline, Days of Future Past.
Yes. Yes. I
Um,
have that one. Yes.
yep. The For me, it's on my left with the Lauren Hill one is the Phoenix, an X-Men famous
Yep.
X-Men story about the Phoenix. Middle is an homage to Amazing Spider-Man number 50, when Spider-Man No More, when he first met up with the Kingpin. And then middle right is an homage to Secret Wars number 1, which is going to be the next
Oh,
one of the next big Marvel movies in 2027.
I read that just recently. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. I love it. That is a great piece right there.
Yeah. So this is, to me, this is the fact that an artist would spend time doing that
Mm-hmm.
speaks volumes to what we've been talking about, the impact that it has on people and the
Yeah.
way it's so much more than a pastime, than
Mm-hmm.
something you just sit and read and consume. It
For sure.
really is worldview shaping.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is. Um, I like to think that I have a very strong sense of justice. Okay, and that is certainly informed by reading about superheroes and their adventures, and why they make the choices they make and why they do what they do. Um, and yeah, it certainly has informed my perspective. And like I mentioned my buddy is a history teacher. We talk about that. When my wife and I were getting married, I would have these awesome conversations with our wedding photographer,
Oh,
because to talk about kind of like blocking, like, okay, there's this picture of myself with my groomsmen, we're kind of like in a triangle type of thing, and that was because I saw a comic book cover with like Iron Man in the middle and all of the Avengers flanking him in like a triangle. I'm like, I want this picture with my groomsmen. And my photographer loved it. She was great. Oh, we're still friends with her. She's tremendous. And we would talk about how like the album would go, and I'm like, okay, can we fade this one in the back with like a little thing and a ribbon to tie it down here? And I guess she didn't have that many engaged husbands before, kind of talk about the photos. But like I did. I talked about the layout of the photos and how they would go, how we'd be positioned and whatever. And so, in preparing for today's podcast with you, Miss Executive Coach, I started thinking about, okay, how if you and I just met, how would I relate comic books to you? And I thought about it, and the story that I came up with is one that it absolutely informs my managerial style.
huh.
And I was 10 years old, okay, and I was making $5. I don't know. I don't think it was a week. It was probably $5. I don't know. But I was making just enough to get enough Spider-Man comic books. And at the time, Spider-Man had 4 monthly comic books, and every quarter there's a 5th week, and so he would have this quarterly book as well. There was Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, Adjectiveless Spider-Man, and then the quarterly one was Spider-Man Unlimited. Well, to get that extra issue, I needed a raise in my allowance. Okay.
Ah.
And so I knew if I was going to go to my dad and ask for more money for the same amount of chores, I had to come correct. And so I got all the list of all the things I was doing, where I was going extra. I was doing a performance review, right? And I was like, well, the neighbor said our grass looked good, right? I cut that, okay, and the whole thing. And so I was like, okay. And he says, and he thought about it. I said, so can I please have a rate? And I think I was asking for like $7.50, because on average, that would cover me to get all the issues of Spider-Man that came out in a year.
Wow.
And he says, okay. And he was like, you think you deserve this? I'm like, yes, I do. And he says, well, what are you going to get with this extra money? And I said, well, I want to be able to get all of the Spider-Man comic books that they come out with. They come out with 4 every month, and then a 5th one every quarter. And he asked, and he said, why do you need this many Spider-Man comic books? Like, what is it?
Hmm.
And I thought about this. Okay, we're at the dining room table. Okay, my mom, she's kind of flanking me. She's got my back a little bit, right? But my dad's sitting at the table, and
Oprah said it's a good idea.
right, just read. Okay, that was her whole position. Is just he's asking you to read more. Okay, can we just do it? But no, my dad had to make me earn it, right? And I respect. So I thought about it. And my dad is an engineer. I went into engineering because of my dad. and he love working on cars. Okay, oil changes, tires, brakes. Like my dad loves to work on cars, and so I thought about it. And I was like, all right, Dad, picture you signed up for a car part of the month club. Okay. And so every month, and now this was before subscription, everything's a subscription now. This was way before that. This is 1992, okay? I am 10 years old at the time, and I might have been
Yeah,
11
there's probably no
because,
subscription around but Columbia House.
right, yeah, okay, or BMG, and my dad was a member of that, okay? So anyway, but I said, every month they're going to send you a new car part, okay? And so Amazing Spider-Man is like the engine. That's the big one. That was the first one. That's the original one. And so they're going to send you the block. They're going to send you the pistons. They're going to send you the hoses. And at the end of the year, you will have every issue of Amazing Spider-Man. You will have a whole car engine. And I was like, but do you have a whole car? And he said, no. I said, right. You also need a gas line. You need a transmission.
I don't.
Okay.
You should have been in sales.
Right.
Marry these.
Okay. And I said, so now that's Spectacular Spider-Man. And at the end of the year, you have your engine and you have your fuel and transmission. Do you have a whole car? He said, no. I said, okay, you're right. You need the frame, you need the body, you need the fender, you need the bumper, you need the doors. You get that in Web of Spider-Man. At the end of the year, do you have a whole car? He's like, no. I said, right. You need your brake lines, you need your safety issues, you need your blinkers, you need your headlights. That's Adjectiveless Spider-Man. And he's like, I'm like, at the end of the year now, do you have a whole car? He said, no. I said, right. There's no tires. Well, every quarter you get a new tire.
Unbelievable.
Okay. And I'm like, now at the end of the year with Amazing, Spectacular, Web, Adjectiveless, and Unlimited, now you have a whole car. And he sat there and he was floored. And he looks over at my mom and he says, I will never question him about reading comic books ever again.
Wow.
He's like, I get it. I get it. Sign him up. Here's the raise. We'll go to the comic store tomorrow. All right. That's it. And so it was like I won, right? I got my raise. Okay. I got my dad to give me a raise in my allowance.
You were 10
specifically
at this time?
I was probably 11 because I had bought some, but like
And
I
writing
didn't.
the book on strategic influencing.
Well,
Okay.
well, so but I was thinking about how does this inform my managerial style? What I learned from that thing, that was a anxiety producing thing. I had to sit down in front of my dad and ask for something, and I had it was very successful. My dad was on board. Okay. But what I learned was to relate what I want or my need in a way that the person who I'm asking for help or asking things in a way that they can understand it and in a way that would hit them.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about cars was the way to get to my dad. And so what I think how that informs my managerial style, Miss Executive Coach, is that I kind of lead through analogy. And I lead through metaphor, and I'll be like, if somebody comes up with a thing, I'm like, oh, we don't want to do this because, and I'm not talking about cliches like boil the ocean and whatever. I'm not talking about that
and weird things. Yeah.
No, but I try to hit them for hit the people where they are interested and their hobbies and their what they like to do, because that's what's going to matter. That's what's going to get them. To get them on side, get them on the team, get them driving forward. And that seems to work. The most recent example of this is I was watching an episode of Bluey with my kids, and there's this awesome episode where the dad has to wake up early because the kids want to go to the park, and he doesn't want to go, but he's like, all right, kids, let's go. And he sees this person walking on the road. He's like, wow, you're up early. What are you doing? Going to the park. He's like, why are you going to the park this early? And the dad's like, got to be done. And so then it's like they're walking along a little bit further, and it's like, hey, are you going to the kid's birthday? Why do you want to take your kids to this birthday party? He's like, it's got to be done. All right. And so I've been using that phrase, gotta be done. All right. At work. Yeah, I know we don't want to do this. This is a thing we just got to do. It's got to be done. All right. And so, that type of analogy or metaphor or something like
Yeah,
that, it hits people. They'll
it does.
remember it. And, I find for me that it works in that you won't have to go repeatedly check up on, are you doing the thing? Is the thing done yet? You don't have to do
Yeah,
that because you've conveyed the message originally in a way that they've understood it, they've internalized it, they get it, and now
yeah,
they're off. And so, yeah, I will use analogies a lot. I will reference superhero stuff, pop culture stuff, whatever it is, but to do it in a way that is impactful to the people I'm talking to or my team or whatever matters to them. And by now they all know I love Spider-Man. I think even, my boss's boss knows that I love Spider-Man. Okay. And so, but yeah, it's impactful, it's meaningful, they remember it, and then they take it with them. And so
yeah.
that's what I found really
They're
works.
mini stories, right? We all know stories have greater impact than just, sharing data or whatever kind of, evidence-based stuff you want to share. It's
Hmm.
always stickier. It always
Yes.
connects with people and they recall and remember it and can leverage it and connect it to, other concepts when it's done through a story. When you give that
Yeah.
data and wind it up into a story. And that's what to me metaphors are just mini stories. That's what
Absolutely.
analogies are, right? And
Yep.
so you can get that and connect with your audience. As you were sharing that, Patrick, what's going through my mind is I wonder if, comic writers, the writers of these stories are thinking the same thing in a similar vein, right? Let's connect with people in a way that's going to make sense. Like when I think of X-Men,
Hmm.
Alpha Flight, anything mutant based like that, as you said, it's about that feeling of difference.
Yep.
And how does that feeling of difference become something that is a source of pride and strength and
Yep.
honor instead of maybe shame or embarrassment or a reason to hide and not connect with others or with society? And I think
Absolutely.
that's a really powerful part of what comics do is they tell stories. And my favorite genre is of fiction has always been fantasy and sci-fi.
Yep.
And I think comics are also visual graphic sci-fi, right?
Absolutely.
It's taking
Yeah.
reality and, well, what if we looked at it from this angle or lens? But it's
Yep.
always rooted in reality.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny. Two of my favorite TV shows have been Star Trek and Buffy the
Yes.
Vampire Slayer.
Yes.
And you
True.
wouldn't think that those two shows are at all similar. They are entirely similar because they deal with very human issues
Yes.
that impact all of us. The only thing that's different is the setting has changed.
Yeah.
In one show, they're in outer space on a different world, talking to different alien races. And in another show, the main character, she's fighting vampires and horror characters and monsters and stuff like that. But she's dealing with going to high school at the time,
Yep.
or the first day of college, while dealing with monsters. I don't know about you. I can absolutely remember my first week of college, and yeah, there were some monstrous people there, and so those stories hit, right? They hit,
I'm
and
not I'm sorry to interrupt. I was
you
just
don't
gonna say
know.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I was sitting in a board meeting Monday night and thinking of how every character in the
Yeah.
room, I'm like, okay, you would be this person, you would be this person, and I'm
Yep.
literally relating them to
Yeah.
X-Men. And
Absolutely.
it helped me make sense of the room of characters that I was in for the first time. It was my first time in a meeting with this particular board. And
Absolutely.
I was like, "Okay, I get you because you're this guy. I get you because you're this woman."
Yep. Yep.
Understood. I know
Um.
how to deal with you now.
Exactly. It's an equalizer, right?
Yeah.
There's the characters from any of these shows, and it doesn't really matter if I think we started and I knocked. I didn't want to read chapter books when I was a kid. I'm an avid reader now. Whatever your preferred genre is, whatever your medium is, doesn't matter. Having those narratives, having those character archetypes, having characters that
Yeah.
you can relate to in your head is an equalizer when you're in that meeting where it's a little anxiety, you're a little anxious and you're not sure what they're going to say and you might be stumbling a little bit. Oh my gosh, the ability to realize who this person is because you've read this, because you've seen that. My goodness, to your point, that is such an equalizer when you're in that room. It's like, okay, I
A
got
game
this now.
changer.
Now
Yeah.
I know who I'm talking to. Got it.
Yeah. And so, you know what? I'm gonna take that as a place to pin this conversation because I know that you and I talk about our kids and know how much they mean to us, and I think that's exactly what I want to offer my kids through comics as well,
Yeah.
is their ability to, walk onto the pitch for that first game where they've not met their, fellow teammates before, or walk into that new classroom when they start in a new grade in September, and
Hmm.
be able to use comics as that entry point, that, as you said, that equalizer to help
Yeah.
them make sense of a new environment and give them a sense of comfort and familiarity that gives them confidence in that.
Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely. That is. Um, I love that so much, and yeah, I try to do that for my kids all the time, and like, just one more, if I may, one more brief thing,
Yeah, of
like,
course.
to I was with my daughter, and she was going to the big school, the elementary school, the big school, and she was nervous, and we had just over the summer we had just rewatched Avengers Endgame,
Mhm.
and we talked about it. I was like, I get it. You're the young person going into school now, and that's a scary thing. You're going to a big place.
Yep.
But I was like, do you know who the biggest hero of Avengers Endgame is? Because it's not Iron Man, it's not the Hulk, it's not Captain America. The biggest hero was Ant-Man. Because if Ant-Man didn't come out of the quantum realm and then put the whole movie in motion, the bad guys would have won.
Yeah.
All right. And so,
Yes.
and then, he had the big moment at the end where he turns into Giant Man. And the good guys are facing off against the bad guys. And that was iconic moment. But I was like, the littlest person is the one who saved the day for everybody in the universe at that point. And I was like, so you got this. I get it. It's a big school. There's going to be bigger
An
kids. There's going
incredible
to be different
message.
people. But the littlest person in that movie was the biggest hero. And she was like, okay, Dad. She rolled her eyes a
Right.
little bit. I don't want to say it was a total whatever, but she rolled her, okay, Dad. But she was okay after that conversation.
And that's
So,
all we can ask for, right?
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that story, and thank you for
Mm.
sharing all of your stories today. This has
Oh,
been
awesome.
such a fun and enriching conversation, as I totally knew it would be.
Awesome. No, thank you for having me. This was great. It was great to talk to you again. Haven't talked to you in a little bit. So thank you for that. And thank you
Yeah.
for having me on.
Of course, such a pleasure. So, to all the viewers, all the listeners, whether you're joining us through Spotify or through YouTube, I hope you found something that was enlightening and fun today, and that it connected for you. Maybe it even prompts you to go and crack open a comic book. Maybe go to the local library if you don't have any on your shelf at
Mm.
home, and take a look at it from your current adult perspective and see how it relates to your life. That's my, executive coach, ex-prof homework for today. Go crack open a comic book, get a cold one with
Yes,
meaning
ma'am.
a
Will
cold
do.
comic book, and see what it's got to offer you in there. So thanks again for spending your time with us here at the Curious Coach's Lemonade Stand. If you haven't already, consider subscribing so that you are always notified when we have a new episode out. We come out about every 2 weeks or so, and always got something new and interesting on tap. So thanks again to you, for Patrick, for bringing such an interesting and just curiosity filled vibe to talking about comics today. It's been such a fun ride. Really, really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, everyone, until next time, please take care of each other, take care of yourself, and be well.